And then you started doing your lives, and I think I was on your first live ever. And like, then you just started bringing on all these guests. Looking back, both of us have kind of come a long way, and that's really awesome to see. The laws are getting harsher and harsher, and once you create a law that says, hey, you can't have this, it's 100 times harder to go back and get that back into, you know, circulation. If you win first place or best in show for that category, you might win $500. You might win $1,000. Close to 1,400 followers on Instagram, 1.65K subs on YouTube, and an astonishing 63.1 thousand followers on TikTok. Tell me about that experience. I think it sparks a lot of interest for people, and I've seen that dude make $1,000 on a live. Just people donating money, like, you know, $200 here, $300. Like, it's crazy, man. That dude's killing it. What's up, guys? I'm your host, John from Elgin, and today we have a special guest. Now, I will say this in advance that this is a pre-recorded video. It's January 1st right now, but tomorrow this is going to air normal scheduled time. But January 2nd, when you're watching this video, is actually my father's birthday. So the guest that I have today is my father himself, Robby Elgin. It's really awesome to bring him on. We've been planning this probably for like about a month or a month and a half. So I'm really excited to have him on, and the reason for me doing this is the fact that, yes, it's his birthday, but also for the fact that I think this episode is going to be a really way to kickstart the year. Having him on, really knowing nothing about reptiles or snakes. Maybe he's got, you know, some experience in the past with reptiles or animals, but we'll kind of find that out. So that is my intent, and I hope that this is going to be a really educational stream for a lot of people that don't have reptiles or people that are just getting into reptiles. You know, so hopefully I can kind of spark your interest in all of this, and hopefully I can win him over and spark his interest, and, you know, get him to, you know, sort of support and understand what I'm doing for this. So without further ado, let me bring on my father. What's up, Dad? How's it going?
Hey, good.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you doing this for me. First off, happy birthday. You know, how?
Yeah, 27. Yeah.
You're 27, and I'm gonna be 33. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, you know. Now I was negative 12, so.
Right. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know we've been kind of like planning this for a little bit, and I wanted to have you on here because I thought it'd be really great. And you know, I think we're gonna have a really good conversation. I know we're not like, you know, always talking on the phone and this and that. I know Mom, you know, kind of is the one that calls me and stuff like that, and that's totally fine. You know, I'm not. And I think we're in the same boat as far as like, it's, you know, we're busy with our schedules and things like that. And I know you're working all the time and stuff, so that's why we're, you know, kind of doing this today. Mm-hmm. But you know, my first question I've got for you is, you know, tell me a little bit about yourself. You know, obviously your name is Robby, and you're my dad. And but you know, is there anything that you would like to let the audience members, you know about you?
Yeah, one of the things is funny. I don't know if I've ever told you this before, but you know, when people ask me my name and I say it's Robby, you know, people think it's Robert or something like that.
Like short for Robert or something?
Yeah. So I always say, no, that's on my birth certificate that way, and I never forgave my mother for that. So
really?
Yeah. I mean, no, it's funny. Yeah. I don't know how you feel about your name because you didn't have a choice in it either. But
yeah.
But I was like, man, why did you have to name me Robby? Because it's just one of those weird, goofy names that you know, whoever has that name, but I don't know.
I've met a couple of Robbys before, and then, you know, I think there's, you know, a couple different spellings, and I'm sure that happens a lot where, you know, people want to put the IE on there and
my own
stuff.
Even my brothers and sisters or whatever, you know, my own family still does it IE, and it's with.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, man. Everybody does it. We got birthday or Christmas cards this year, and it was, you know, with the IE, but you know, it's at this point in life, it's nothing to stress out about. but you would think that even like your own family would know how to spell your name, but
Yeah, no,
yeah,
I
yeah,
understand that. I obviously, my name is Jonathan. Maybe people don't even know that. I'm not sure, but and I spell Jon because there's no H. It's
hmm
not Johnathanthan. So a lot of people, misspell my name. But it's kind of funny since I started doing this reptile thing and kind of getting involved in the community that we've got. Is there's he's probably watching right now. Like I said, I know this is pre-recorded, but I'm sure he's gonna hop in and kind of join the chat and everything. But his name is Terrence, but we call him T Keys or Keys. But he's got a channel called Keys Constrictors. That's his brand with his wife, and he calls me John No H, or sometimes he'll just call me No H,
yeah.
because there's a lot of Johns. There's a lot of Jonathans. So he calls me No H, and it kind of stuck. So a lot of people
Yeah.
call me No H, but
Well, it's funny you say that because I used to be back when I was a teenager. I went by Robbie with a Y, instead of the IE. So that's people would call me. My friends would call me Robbie with a Y, just because.
oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much the same thing.
Same thing. Yeah.
So
So
it's kind of cool. I mean, like I said, it kind of stuck, and
yeah,
you know,
and it's kind of weird because and your people watching this are may or may not understand this because of their different family dynamics, but you're always going to be Jonathan to us.
yeah,
It's kind of weird to see the John and stuff like that because that's just you grew up with that, but you're an adult,
yeah.
so I guess I'll let it pass. But
Well, it's interesting because anywhere that I go to work, or if I'm starting work and you got to fill out paperwork, they see Jonathan, and so like all my bosses call me Jonathan, and other people like will call me Jonathan. I'm like, oh, you can just call me John. Where it's just easier. I don't even know when that started, to be honest. Like it might have started like when I was friends with Nate in elementary school. I don't even know. I think I've gone by John for a while, at least since junior high. But I think it's something that people just start calling
It's
you because it's
yeah, it's
easy.
kind of like a family thing. I mean, it's like certain people know you by one name and certain people know you by another name. It's like your mom. I know her. I call her Chris when I'm at home, but out in public, she's Christine. And
Yeah.
so it's just, but it's that family dynamic. It's always going to be what it is. So
No, for sure. I mean, I think that's what's interesting is so everybody watching, I've also got a brother. His name is Christian. And I remember there was a point in his life where I think he was trying to go by Chris, and then I'm like, oh man, like that's just so different than what I'm used to, and
now,
like, and then Chris is usually short for Christopher or whatever. But
now you also have to let everybody know the similarity with all of our names. What's the
I,
same with all of us? Come
I
on,
have
man.
I have
Our,
no idea.
our middle names.
Oh, Scott. Yeah,
Okay.
actually, I think that was something I was thinking about bringing up.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
So
all our middle names are Scott.
I'm Robbie Scott Elgin. He's Jonathan Scott Elgin and Christian Scott Elgin. So
And I don't know if that's like I don't know. I think I've maybe met a couple people that do that with their families, but
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it works. I think it's important.
And if I had it to do all over again, probably like if I was a kid growing up or something, I'd probably go by my middle name just because
Yeah,
I detest my my first name so much.
yeah.
What do you do at this
Yeah,
age?
I remember like growing up, even like trying to rap and stuff like that. I think I was like, I'm gonna go by Jay Scott or
hmm
or whatever. What I mean. But yeah, I like that middle name a lot.
Yeah.
Scott's it's a good name.
Well, when I
Um,
used to, I think we were talking about maybe even talking about this. When I was in college, I was a DJ for about 2.5, 3 years, and I went by my full name, Robbie Scott Elgin, on the air.
oh really?
So yeah, that was
Yeah.
my yeah, and I used to sign my whole name, the entire name. So I don't know where
Okay.
I started that, but I just
Huh.
I just wanted something different when I was on air. So yeah,
Yeah. So, well, that goes perfectly into the first, set of topics that I wanted to bring up is used to be a radio DJ, in college, and I'm doing this thing now.
yeah,
And so, I kind of wanted to touch on that because, I know things have changed. There's internet now. There's,
hmm
you know, podcasts, apps, and things that you can go on. But back then, I'm pretty sure it was just the radio. You had to kind of tune in. You couldn't miss it or record it. You know what I mean? So when you're doing that, how old were you, and what was that like?
So I was in, like I said, I was in college, and so I probably start. And the only reason what happened was I took a communications class, and the professor happened to be the general manager of the radio station, and so I was like, hey man, I think I'd like to try this, and so I was probably 19 maybe 20 when I started, and I tell you, one of the things, and you're probably understanding this the more you do what you're doing right now, is that one of the best things it did for me was to be able to immediately, think on my feet and speak, uh, uh, with a clarity and with just being able to, to get it out right off the top of my head, and things like that. Is not everybody can do that, and so like I'm sure from when you started your podcast to where you are right now, you develop that, and it really helps. And for everybody else that's doing the podcast like you're doing, I mean, it's a skill that you're not born with. You just have to develop it. And when you do that, what it does is it carries on through everything. Because I'm in sales right now. I've been doing sales for probably as long as you can remember doing something.
Pretty much, yeah.
And so, but having, and I've never even thought about it until right now. Is it okay if I call you Jonathan?
Call me. Yeah, you can call me that. No,
uh,
yeah, just
yeah.
yeah,
So, but what it does, what it did. I didn't even think about it until just as we started this conversation. That was probably the foundation of where I really began to even develop the things that I do now, 30 years later. And my career is came from being a DJ, and
yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't give that up for anything. So
So having been a DJ and everything, actually, first I want to ask, how
mhm.
long did you do that for?
2.5, 3 years, something along that line.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah,
It was
until
it
I
like a was it like a part time thing, a full time thing,
yeah, it was a
or
it was a part time thing. I would generally work like 3 nights a week, and it was an AM station, and so it's kind of weird about AM. There are the FCC regulates AM stations, and some of them, and I don't know how it is anymore, but that used to be like the station I was at could only operate from sun up to sundown, and then it had to go off air. So like most stations you think of in the radio, on the radio they're 24 hours, but with this station it was sun up to sundown, and it was an AM station, and so I would go in the afternoons like 5 o'clock and work until sundown, or till
yeah.
sign off and stuff like that, and I worked just about every single weekend. So
Oh, okay.
oh yeah, man, I loved it though. It was a great gig. Loved it.
What type of station was it?
So it was a Christian radio station. Of course, I was
Gotcha.
in Bible college at the
Yeah.
time, and so it was a Southern gospel station. So we
Oh,
played a bunch of quartet stuff and whatever. But it was a great experience, and um, only maybe out of the entire school, me and maybe one other person were able to do this, and it
yeah,
was just because I guess I had the talent for it or the knack for it or whatever. So yeah, it was a blast. And
for sure.
oh,
So
I have to
yeah,
tell
go
you
ahead.
this. You didn't know. You probably don't know this, but after we moved to Texas from Louisiana, before you were born in Texas, of course. But
Yeah.
there was a time when I was in between jobs, and I actually drove to Colorado Springs and did a sound take for a Christian radio station there, trying to get
Hmm.
hired.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, it was. They gave me a script to read, and it was like a news script, and it was had all these weird foreign politician names and stuff like that. And I
Hmm.
kind of blew the audition, and
Oh, really?
so yeah, but theoretically we could have you could have grown up most of your life in Colorado Springs already.
Hey, guys, hold on 1 second. I'm gonna actually change the layout just because there is a little bit better way. It's makes it a little bit more
Hey,
personal, I think.
hey, there you
Um,
go.
so um, so did the let me ask you this. It's a going aside from the DJing stuff.
Mhm.
You're a bass player. You've been playing bass ever since I was born.
Yeah,
At least I think.
yeah,
I remember you playing bass in church.
yeah.
Always seeing you on the worship team. I think you led worship, many times, and was doing that. When did that start? Was that a college thing, or did you start younger
No,
than that?
I started playing probably when I was 15,
Oh, okay.
and I never took lessons. Uh,
Yeah.
Completely self-taught. Um, and so, yeah, it was just. In fact, when I first started playing, the way I did it was I would sit up on the stage with the bass player for that church, and I would watch him play, and I would try to mimic what he was doing, and so I didn't have any volume at all. And then
Yeah.
finally, after some time, I got good enough where I got to start doing it.
Yeah,
So
that's cool. And I think one of my biggest memories growing up was being at was it Cornerstone?
yeah,
So being at Cornerstone, yeah, watching you play bass, and then one of the coolest things I remember was you teaching Dwayne,
right,
and then he kind of went on to do bigger, better things with that, and it's cool to see the fact that like I remember you being with him like after church,
mhm.
just sitting down like on the steps and just kind of like showing him how to play and things like that, and he was like a really young kid I think at the time.
Yeah, he was like in fifth grade when I first started teaching him,
Oh wow.
and he far surpassed me in his skills and talents and stuff like that. He ended up being, yeah, traveling professionally
Yeah.
with a very well known Christian artist, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, he was phenomenal. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's crazy to think that that seed was planted back then and
Yeah.
that you kind of
But I
watered
mean,
that. And
but you're even the same way. I mean, you may not you may not feel like it, but I think you're a super talented guitar player, far better than I ever was. And but that's just because you sat for hour and hour and hour and just played,
yeah,
and wrote a bunch of your own stuff and all that. And maybe someday you should put that on your channel, let people see
I've
what you.
I've thought about doing yeah, making like my own intros or outros
Yeah,
for
yeah,
this. Because there's like a song that I made. It's just I just don't know if it's the correct vibe or whatever, but it's like an instrumental song, and
yeah.
it'll always be an instrumental song.
Hmm.
But I'd love to put like a band around it, kind of give it more of that dynamic effect to it.
Yeah,
But yeah, I for anybody watching, I grew up playing guitar, and I think the first time that I really picked up the guitar was in probably in junior high. We had like a
yeah.
music class, and they had us play all the instruments, from keys
Well,
to
I know you wanted to play the drums, and
yeah. Well,
uh,
yeah. I think I would have been a really good drummer. It is what it is. I'm not, I don't know. Like I was really like sort of upset and disappointed at the time because like every 12, every 10, 11, 12-year-old boy wants to play the drums.
right, right.
And you can't have 10 out of the 20 kids in
Yeah.
class playing drums or percussion or
And then
the bells.
what was the instrument that they ended up making you play? Like the trumpet or something?
Yeah, I had to play the trumpet. Yeah. And I don't know. I didn't like it because I think around that time I had braces and just that metal to metal,
Oh,
like
yeah.
just gives you that metallic-y feel, like you're chewing
Oh,
on foil or something. I don't know. I
ooh,
didn't
yeah,
like. So yeah, I mean, yeah. And I want to kind of go back to being at Cornerstone and things like that.
yeah.
I would say probably the number one, probably most impactful memory that I have from that, and like as far as like pushing me into a direction of music, and really kind of wanting to do that with my life, and diverting from that is that growing up, like I always wanted to do like sound recording and go off to school as a music producer. All this
Mhm.
started from that memory in Texas. So I remember being up being out there. There was like a gig that night, or maybe it was like the youth group. I don't know 100%, But you brought me there. We were up in the sound booth, just kind of like looking down. So for
Yeah.
anybody just watching, you got your sanctuary, and then there was like a
A
on the
hole in
second
the wall
level.
almost.
Yeah, it was like a hole in the wall where you got your sound.
Yeah.
I don't know if they had cameras up there. They might have had cameras. I'm not sure if they were even doing that. But there's a sound booth up there. We're watching down it, and they had brought in like some. It was like a hip hop show, and there was like a couple people break dancing, and it was the first time I saw anybody ever spin on their head. I'm like, wow, like as a I don't know 5 or 6 year old or however old I was, like that's an impactful memory when you see someone dancing and you hear the music and the beat and then all of a sudden you see someone get put on a helmet and like start spinning on their head for like 30 seconds. You're like, wow, that's amazing. But I think that sort of memory, and then along with playing bass in church, like really kind of pushed me into the direction of like, man, like this is a really cool, avenue that, I could follow down. And I think even all throughout, you know, church and youth groups and, moving to Iowa and even like meeting people there is like, I always gravitated towards, musicians and people that were, involved with like rap or, just people that kind of branched out beyond like typical like gospel or whatever, you know what I mean. So it's like
Yeah.
it was kind of cool growing up. And
Well, I remember the times when you would set up the video camera and go down in the basement and you would practice your break dancing and stuff like that. And
yeah, I
I
got
don't
into that for a little bit.
yeah. I think because that service you're talking about where they were doing the spinning and all the rap and stuff like that back in Texas, I actually still have that. And on the
Hmm.
computer I'm talking to you right now, I have it. I got a digital converter and I took all of our old videotapes and I converted them to digital. So you guys are going to have those someday,
Hmm.
so you can go back and watch all your soccer and even
Hmm.
that was on there because I remember seeing it whenever I was converting them to digital. It's really cool.
That's interesting because that's probably one of the most vivid memories that I have. And then I want to kind of like get into another sort of memory I have, and then we can get into all the ball python stuff because we're
Yeah,
just
man.
getting to know each other right now. Kind of taking it easy that way. So guys, if you're watching, please don't leave. We got like an amazing show lined up. Um, but so I wanted to ask you. So besides bass, music, things like that. What other things are you into? I know growing up we would go fishing. When I became a teenager, around that time, we'd go hunting.
Yeah.
But have those things always been a part of your life?
No, no. I mean, so when I was a kid, we would go fishing every once in a while, but I mean, I didn't have the parental structural support that was really anything where I could develop any of that. Um, one of the you talk about early memories. One of my early memories as a child was my grandfather who would take me fishing. Now he died when I was 5 years old, so
Yeah.
that tells you how old these memories are and how young they are. Because you're kind of the same way. You had these memories that somehow you pulled out of your life that were even from very very young, which is amazing. But my grandfather used to take me fishing, and he had a boat, and I remember I would always ask him, "Granddaddy, when can I drive the boat? Granddaddy, can I drive the boat?" And his answer to me was, "When the moon comes over, or when the moon comes over the mountain, or something like that." Again, I was so small, and I would ask him and ask him. Finally, the last time I asked him, I said, "Granddaddy, can I drive the boat?" He said, "Next time we go fishing, I'll let you drive the boat." And there was never another time. He
Yeah.
was 60 years old and he died of a heart attack.
Mm.
And so but that probably was that early thing that kind of got that bug in me. But no, I mean, I never really did. We did a we did in Texas. We did some fishing, not a lot of
Yeah.
it, but I had never hunted until we came to Iowa.
Oh,
And
really?
so no, I had never shot shotguns, or I mean, I did as a kid, but no, we never had any of that until, I mean, people may not realize, but like where you are in Colorado, of course, hunting is a tremendous industry and a lot of people do it. But people maybe don't think that Iowa is a great place for the outdoors and stuff, but we have some of the biggest deer in the world
Yeah.
right here in Iowa. And I mean, your brother's proof of that. The one that he shot when he was
Yeah,
15 years old.
I'm a little bit jealous. I
I
mean,
know, me too.
I don't even know if I've hunting, the 3 or 4 times that, we went out and I,
Hmm.
got a deer. I don't even think I saw a legal buck or anything,
Right. Yeah. They're so
So,
rare. Yeah. They're so
yeah,
rare. I didn't see any this year when I was out. So,
yeah.
but the ones that are out there are massive. And but yeah, I mean the hunting and the fishing is something that happened while we were here in Iowa. Um, the thing that I did a lot of maybe 10, 15 years ago, and for some reason just stopped probably 7, 8 years ago, was golfing. And my company had a golf outing in June, this past year, this past June. And so I thought, I don't want to be the crappiest golfer out there, so I better at least pick up my clubs again and at least see what I can do with them. And I got a bug for golfing that's kind of ridiculous now.
Oh,
Um,
right now, even
yeah,
still.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, gotcha. It would
And
be fun.
yeah, it's too bad that it's cold outside because even like a day like today, I'd be out golfing. Your
Yeah.
mom's been real good about letting me go, so
That's
kudos to her.
good. So, last sort of thing I want to like mention before we get into the reptile stuff,
Yeah.
because I know people are kind of like anticipating that, but it's like it's good to be able to talk about this stuff. Is probably my very first memory. Well, I would say the very first memory, but like the one of the earliest memories that impacted me growing up was we used to live on a street where I think we had Dougie. We lived next to a guy where he would mow his lawn every day. He had rabbits and things like that.
Hmm.
But so, anyways, living in that house, I remember, you'd be working and stuff like that, and but I remember we had this calendar in the kitchen, and every day we would like put a red X over the calendar days until our fishing trip, and I think it might have been maybe one of the first times I ever went fishing,
Oh,
and and so I remember like just checking that calendar every day. I'm like, all right, 5 more days, 4 more days, 3 more days, and then finally,
really?
yeah, I remember, and I remember we finally went fishing. I remember exactly where we went fishing, and I think you have a picture somewhere of where I caught my first fish,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
remember the anticipation for that was so intense for me. And then when we finally went fishing, I think I caught maybe it was like a bluegill and a little baby catfish, and
Hmm.
so that was one of my first memories. And I actually, I have memories of being at the playground and this and that. Eating watermelon. I think you have even a picture of that somewhere. But that I think
It's funny. Here's look at here
what
as a
what am
corn
I in a
dog.
corn dog?
Yeah, eating a corn dog. All right,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I don't know if you have the first fishing
yeah,
picture, do you?
actually, I'm kind of looking for it on my phone here because
Uh,
I think I might have it on my phone. If I don't, I bet I have it on my tablet.
but
In
yeah,
my pictures.
I remember, yeah, that really well, and I think that's what got me interested and fascinated, not only with fishing but the outdoors, because like I remember going to that pond, and we made a little trek from what I remember. I don't know how long it was, but I remember,
Yeah,
had to like walk to the ponds, and you can
yeah,
walk around in this and that. And I remember seeing like empty turtle shells, and then of course living turtles and things like that, and um, yeah, and then you look in the water, see little fish, minnows, frogs, tadpoles, this, that. So yeah, I just remember like seeing this big old turtle shell and like, oh wow. And I think just all of our fishing trips growing up, from early age to even, being a teenager and whatnot, like that's what really kind of stuck with me. And I think if you
yeah,
fast forward to that and what I'm doing now with the reptiles,
yeah.
I think that it's all connected in a sort of way as far as like my fascination with animals, because yeah, fishing, hunting, and then when you're out doing those things you see other things on the side, um, and so I think that really sort of captured my imagination and really kind of got me interested in things. And if you want to kind of like fast forward into more memories, growing up, we used to have, I think I was a teenager, we used to have a couple leopard geckos, and that aside from like cats,
Yeah.
mostly, and then like dogs here and there. Um, we had some leopard geckos, and like they were cool, I would say. And I should say this. Uh, okay, hold on. Oh yeah, so for everybody watching, that was like the first fish that I ever caught.
Two of them. You're holding the catfish
First
with
two,
your
yeah,
one hand, and the other one down here
yeah.
on a string.
So yeah, that little
Look how
path.
proud you were, man. And I
Yep.
love the dinosaur shirt tucked into the
Yeah, that's
shorts.
another thing too. Is like the whole. I was fascinated with dinosaurs, and I think a lot of little boys are growing up.
Yeah.
But yeah, just being fascinated with dinosaurs and yeah, fishing and animals and things like that. Like those are memories that kind of stick with you. And yeah, so going back to that sort of thing is we had some geckos growing up, and that was like my first reptile, my only reptile. But going to those reptile shops and those stores, always saw ball pythons. That's a staple in the reptile community, and the reptile industry is ball pythons. They're easily accessible, but even back then, I'm sure they weren't super cheap. Maybe the normals were, but I remember going to the shops and then seeing an albino. And when I look back and then hearing people talk about the prices that albinos were, when I was 5, in the 90s, those were some expensive animals. And now, that price point has dropped down. You can probably get an albino for, let's say $300, give or take, as a
Now,
as a base morph.
is
But
that because breeders are able to produce those better, or
yeah.
is it still a freak of nature to have an albino, or is
No,
it
not anymore. People kind of figured out the genetics. They kind of figured out how to replicate those, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I don't want to get too far ahead, but an albino is what you call a recessive gene. So essentially, you need both parents to carry that gene. So um, either you could, like, let's say, yeah, so both parents need to carry that gene, whether it's a quote visual, as what we say in the industry, which means that you can see it's an albino, but that albino, let's say you have a male albino, like visual albino, you breed that with a normal female. Well, all of that female's eggs are going to come out looking normal, but they're going to carry one I think allele, so they're going to carry one of those genes um, with them. So they're technically heterozygous, or het, as we say. I think, yeah, back then it wasn't very easy to come by, and there were other morphs. Like I said, I'm like throwing a lot of terminology out there, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But yeah, so that price point has dropped a lot. There's certain mutations that come out that whenever that mutation happens, it's just like a freak of nature, kind of like what you were saying. An albino, I think was a wild caught animal, and you never know if you can replicate it or this or that. But yeah, over the years, people have understood that once there's a mutation in their sort of genetics and then that line of ball python, that a lot of times you can replicate it. Sometimes you get the recessives, which an albino is a recessive. So that means, like I said, you need both parents to carry that in order to make a visual, but you only need one parent to technically pass that trait down. But you just, like I said, that's a whole different thing we'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, I think it started with like normals or classics, as people say. And yeah, my fascination, or my sort of desire and attention got caught up on the albino, and not just like the albino ball python. Of course, yeah, I always wanted an albino ball python, but even being at the zoos and seeing like an albino alligator, and I think we have pictures of that somewhere. And it's like, yeah, just being at the zoos and stuff like that growing up too, like really kind of caught my attention. I don't know what it is about reptiles that I really liked. And I think that desire has sort of like peaked lately, you know what I mean? But like I said, it plants that thought into you. We're like, oh man, like I would love to just, see those things all the time. Or, I don't think I was like I don't think back then I don't think I really saw keeping reptiles as something that people do, more than outside of zoos and like ball pythons and geckos. But I do want to say this because it's really funny. So the geckos that we had growing up,
Yeah.
Komodo and Indy. So Komodo was
yeah.
yeah, Komodo and Indy. I will say this because I did a little bit of research on it, and I remember what they look like very specifically. So Komodo was a fat-tailed gecko, and Indy was a leopard gecko. And I don't think we actually knew that back then, but they're two different species of geckos. That's why, well, technically leopard gecko. So Indy, the leopard gecko. From my research, they actually get bigger than the leopard or than the fat-tailed geckos, but the fat-tailed gecko was actually bigger. So Komodo was bigger at the time. Then we got Indy sometime a little bit later than that. But from my research, African fat-tail, so the fat-tailed gecko, so African fat-tailed gecko is from Africa, while the leopard gecko is from the Middle East. Now, what that really means is that fat-tailed geckos need high humidity and leopard geckos need low humidity. So they're two different species. They require a little bit different husbandry. And like I said, leopard geckos they get to a larger size, and the fat-tailed geckos stay a little bit smaller. But they come from two different regions in the world. And growing up, like, I honestly thought they were the same. I knew they looked different because Indy was like very purple and violet and blue, and that's why we called him Indy, because he had these like really cool colors going on. But I think that if anything, that kind of shows how far the reptile industry has gone. Like maybe there wasn't a lot of education back then, or going into shops and like not really being told, hey, maybe don't keep them together or this or that.
And that's what we did. We kept them together, and in fact, wasn't it Indy that ended up not eating as much? And
yeah, and I think that also comes, attributes to the fact that Komodo was larger at the time, and who knows? Like it could have been our husbandry. It could be that we had a certain environment and it just wasn't suitable for them, and that's what happens to a lot of reptiles is that they get stressed out. It's not what they're accustomed to. It's not what's in their nature to be around. So that can stress them out to where they don't eat because it's like a stress factor. You know what I mean? And that happens to ball pythons a lot. If you keep them in an environment that is not up to par with what they require, like humidity, temperatures, if it's too hot, too cold, too high of humidity, too low, a lot of times they can start to like recede and like kind of draw back and not eat. And that could be very well what happened.
So let me ask you, can I ask you a question about that? Do the pythons have to, they're not social animals in the sense of they don't want to all be together, or can they all be together? Or does then it become a fight for food and the hierarchy of nature and like whoever the survival of the fittest, or what?
So my understanding is that ball pythons are very solitary creatures. They don't really like to be around other animals. They like their space, and that's why like people have racks. Mine are just simple. I got like my small ones right here, and then like my bigger ones, right there. But over the years, I think we've learned, not that I've learned, people figure it out for me, but understanding that the way a ball python exists in nature is how we should try to replicate it at home. So in the wild, in Africa, they're found oftentimes in like abandoned termite dens or termite mounds, I guess, or holes in the ground that have been abandoned by an animal. So that way they kind of just like find their way in there. It holds that moisture and humidity really well because like if you think of a termite mound, it's this mound. If a snake can get in there, like all of that moisture is being held in there. So they really like that. And so our job as like ball python breeders and keepers is to sort of replicate that. Now, I have seen people keep ball pythons together and this and that. Like if I go to the local reptile shop here, the way that they're selling them maybe I shouldn't even say their name, but the way that they're selling them, they've got all their males in one enclosure, like a big 75-gallon, and they've got all their females in another. Now, I'm really hoping that's just how they're selling them and putting them on display. because I think if you have too many of them, yeah, they will start to stress out, and they're like, oh, like, yeah, they might get a little bit anxious about having so
Mhm.
much activity around them. Um, so that's sort of my take on it. Is you don't want to keep them with other animals. You don't want to
Well,
keep them with other ball pythons unless you're breeding.
right.
When you're breeding, um, you've got like specific times that you throw them in there. When they're done, sort of doing their thing, or locking, or trying to do that, then you take them out, put them in their own enclosure, because yeah, they can get stressed and not eat or this or that.
Well, I can see definitely like in a pet store setting where, especially someone who doesn't know much about pythons, if someone says I want a male python, they can just go right to the male enclosure and say, okay, which one of these males do you want? But if it was just the ever 16-year-old kid working in a pet store and
Yeah.
someone says I want a male python and they're all mixed together, they don't know.
Yeah, that's like an interesting thing about them too, is because you can't tell just by looking at a snake what it is. So a lot of people like to. There's two different methods that people use to determine the sex of like a ball python, a snake, or whatever. And is a lot of people will pop them, which is like kind of just
That's
allowing
what she said. No.
allowing yeah allowing it's a method where you allow their sex organs
Yeah.
to protrude from their
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
And so snakes, like male snakes, have hemipenes, which is like two penises, I guess technically. So it's you pop it out and it's like root. So you
Yeah.
can kind of see that, or you got the female that only has like that one little area on her.
Hmm.
So that's what people kind of do to be able to determine the sex of them. Or you can probe, which is another sort of method that people use. They get this probe, like let's
Hmm.
say this is it. They stick it in. If it goes far, it's male, I believe, and if it only goes a short little distance, then it's a female. I have not tried that. I would be a little bit nervous, at least starting out, because a lot of people fear that if you're just going to stick it too far, it's going to ruin
Yeah,
their body
and
and stuff.
especially depending on the size of the snake itself as well, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you have to be
so
careful with a probe on a smaller.
I'm sure you do. I'm
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and as far as like those two methods go, if you're popping, I've noticed I can do it on babies and smaller snakes, but when I get my larger ones out, their muscles on their body are just so much more pronounced, and so it's really kind of hard to get that right pressure on there. A lot of people, I think, with enough practice, can do it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's how people determine the sex, and I do know people that have bought like a male and they find out it's a female, they buy a female and they find out it's a male. It's just, you know, um, to whatever method that people are using, maybe they're just not 100% sure on. So sometimes I can get, mixed
Well,
up, unfortunately.
but I can also see, I mean, where there would be maybe a little bit of a lack of integrity with some breeders, where someone says, I want a male, and they have three extra females over the males. And again, how do you really, for like me, if I were to go to try to buy one, if I were to try to buy one from you and say, hey, Jonathan, I want a male python, you could sell me whatever you want to, and I'm not going to know, you know. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. A lot of people.
there's got to
Yeah.
be there may be some integrity issues there, at least where someone's not you're not getting what they think they're getting.
I think that's certainly possible. I think maybe, especially probably more back in the old school days, I think
Mhm.
people just want to get rid of stuff.
Right.
From talking to some of the old school breeders that have been doing it in the 80s, 90s, this and that, like I think things have changed a lot, and it's not so much like a dog eat dog world as it
Hmm.
was back then. But now there's a lot of openness to it. There's a lot more integrity now than probably there ever was, to be
Hmm.
honest. But I think if
And it's
someone just wants to sell you a snake, they might be like, oh, I
and part of what you guys are doing with these podcasts and stuff, I think feeds to that integrity, because
yeah.
there's a lot more awareness and a lot more knowledge nowadays than there would have been, like you said, back in 20, 30 years ago. And so the very fact that there's such a community now, when when we were growing up, there you would have gone again. You would have gone to that little pet store, and they would have had five snakes in there. And you figure out, you think that you're getting something, and maybe not. So yeah,
Sure.
yeah. So
Yeah.
you
And
guys are
that's
doing
a
it. You're doing a great service for the novice community like me, because that just raises awareness everywhere.
for sure. I will say this though, that there can be some integrity issues, maybe less with sex and things like that. But it more comes around to people that say they have these certain genetics and they just don't. They're saying, "Oh, I bred this to that, and I made these babies that are this," but those babies don't actually have that lineage or they have that line. So whenever we use the word het or heterozygous,
Mhm.
it's a het means it carries a gene, but it's not visual. You can't actually tell whether or not it has it unless you know what the parents were.
So
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 that can
can I
happen a lot.
so can I ask you a question about that? So are there breeders out there, and maybe you'll get to this point, or maybe you do it now? I don't know. When you have those babies, are you drawing blood and doing DNA testing, or what do you? How is that? How are we getting to that point to where you know?
Really good topic. And for anybody watching, like I hope you're still sticking around because this is. I'm glad you asked that, Dad. Is literally just well, I mean, I'm sure it's been happening for a couple years now, but just within this past year, a huge revolution has happened where we actually have genetic testing now. So the process of that is to take a fresh shed. Obviously make sure
Hey,
it's not obviously make sure it's kind of dried out and things like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
But what
yeah.
you can do, there's two or three labs in the U.S. and Canada that they'll take your shed, they'll
Hmm.
do genetic testing on it, and they can tell you certain traits. Now, in order to actually understand if you have like I'm gonna start throwing some genes out there, but let's say you have like an ultra male or a clown, or a puzzle, or the rest of that. So if you have the het
I
version of
like to
those,
consider myself an ultra male.
yeah, that's straight up. Me too. Me too. That's going in a replay. That's going into like a that clip is getting cut out. So if you have one of those in your collection, but it's a heterozygous form where you can't actually see it a lot, because yeah, a lot of times you don't know if the parent passed that down. You can know if it's a visual, but if you have a het and then you breed that het to a normal, you might not actually get more hets. You might have like 25% that actually carry that gene
Mhm.
on further and further. So that's when genetic testing comes into play, as far as like, all right, I want to know if this snake is carrying this. Why is that so important? Is for the fact that you can have a gene. Okay, so you could buy a snake that, let's say, you put in $2,000 into it. Now, if you start having babies, you might not it might be het for two or three four different genes, you know what I mean, and you don't know if all of those genes got passed on.
Right,
Now what you can do is, if you're looking for a specific gene, like, all right, I want to know if this is clown, because I don't want to spend 3 years raising it up, feeding it, putting
right.
hundreds of dollars into it, to just find out that it didn't even have that gene.
Just because
So
it was the offspring of a clown, but it didn't have it, but it didn't carry the gene with it. So
so
and you could
it
have
gets
multiple snakes in that hatching, like you had, I think, eight or something like that in that
I had 7 from mine,
seven.
yeah.
Okay, so
So
but maybe only three carry what you want to continue breeding on.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So like I said, with like a clown. Actually, you know what? Let me just show you what a clown looks like, because then it'll kind of make a little bit more sense. So I'm gonna pull up a picture here of a clown. Now, this is a clown ball
Wow.
python. So this um, is a visual recessive, is what we would say in the industry. But let's say this clown had some babies with just like a normal. All of those babies are going to carry this clown trait. But if you take one of those babies and then breed it to back to a normal again, there's you're not going to get 100% hets.
Yeah.
So, like I said, you need 2 of those babies to like make a clown, but you're not going to see the clown. So that's like really important. So there's maybe, I don't know, like maybe up to 10 genes that we have out of like the 300 genes that are actually in the industry. So if you want to send a shed off to a lab, there's only a set number of genes that we've got so far because it's so new. Now, yeah, I mean, there's like, for people watching will understand this, but there's like the yellow belly complex, which means you can test for yellow belly, spark. I think you maybe can do asphalt or gravel, and I have more, pictures of those. But then there's like an ultramel test. I know there's a clown test. There's a pied. And so pretty much people are testing for the recessives over other genes. Yellow belly is not a recessive at all, but yellow belly is so close looking to a normal that people want to know. And especially if you start jumbling in like 4 or 5 genes, it's hard to really kind of tell what you have at a certain point.
And the recessive is a favored a gene or whatever. I mean, that's what people want.
Yes, because recessives, like I said, it takes more time in order to, people call it proving out. So if you have like a het clown in your collection, you're like, oh, well, people also like to throw this around. So like if you have a 100% het, that means that 100% carries that gene. You just can't see it. If you breed that 100% het to other snakes, you're only going to get a certain percentage of that actually being that. So you could breed a het to a het, and then you could get like a 66% het, which means it's not 100. It may or may not carry it, but the likelihood of it carrying it is going to be 66%. Or if you breed a het clown to a normal, I think you're only going to get like 33% of a 33% chance of that snake actually, that baby carrying that gene. So genetic testing, if you have a 33% or 66% het, then you can send that shed off and be like, is this something worth chasing? Because a lot of times people get like what we call like double het, triple het, where it may be there, or double possible het or this or that. So yeah, in order to ensure that you've got what you're looking for to advance your projects, a lot of people would like to spend that $60 to just know, because like I said, you're spending time feeding them every week. You're spending time, with space. You're spending, space. But yeah, if like you're like, oh, I think this is a het clown, it proves not to be a het clown. Well, you might as well just sell it to somebody, and then reinvest that money into,
someone who just wants a little pet or something like that.
Sure, yeah, you could do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really interesting thing that's going on, and in 1, 2, 5 years, there's going to be a lot more tests. Where I'm sure there's going to be 50 tests in 2 or 3 years, where enough people have sent in their sheds of a specific gene, and the labs have to sequence that just like human sequencing. You know what I mean? Right. So they have to figure out that code that's in there that is specific to that gene.
I think that's really fascinating, though, that it's done from sheds, so that it's not an invasive blood test or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what I thought it would have been. It would have been a blood test, but no, that's fascinating that science is right there. And I guess it makes sense, because you can get a hair sample from a human and get all the genetic DNA information that you need. So
yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. So it's really interesting, and a lot of people are really anticipating that. Some people like the mystery of like, do I actually have this gene in my collection? And then there's other people that just want to get straight to the point, because like they got time to save, they need money, they've got money to save. And if they can, they would reinvest a little bit differently than just kind of guessing and doing that, because a male ball python typically takes about a year, maybe a year and a half before it's ready to breed, which is not really a long time if you think about it. But if you've got a female, she's got to be 3 times the weight of a breeding male, which means she's going to take 2 or 3 years, maybe even longer, to be sexually ready to do that. And not only just sexually ready, but she's got to have the body mass on her, because whenever she goes into ovulation and once she does become gravid, which is basically like this saying, she's carrying eggs. When she does become gravid, she'll stop eating and kind of like go into maternity mode and stuff.
So do they go into what I would understand as heat? I mean, is it just a specific time when the female's ready to breed and the male is ready to breed, or could that happen just at any time?
So yeah, those are a couple good questions, because ball pythons technically can breed all year round. There's breeders that are breeding all year round. If you get into other snakes like colubrids, they go into like a brumation, which is like a hibernation mode where their body cools down and they kind of like hibernate for the winter or whatever. And that could be, due to the region that they came from. With ball pythons living in Africa, I mean, the temperatures probably don't fluctuate as much. So technically they can breed all year round. I know some people have more success breeding in the spring, from what I understand. And then a lot of people find success breeding like after a rainstorm or during like a rainstorm. And I don't know what that is. Maybe it kind of like cools them down or gets them into like, maybe it's just the energy in the air. I really don't know. But they can breed. Yeah, they can breed all year round.
Okay.
But with females, they do have specific cycles. I think a male could probably breed as far as like pretty much any time, but a female, if she's not having that cycle, if she's not going through ovulation, then she's not going to go. She has to build what are called follicles, which that's like a whole nother discussion, but she needs to develop follicles. And then once she starts to go into ovulation, her body kind of swells up, and that's when she's like sort of like ready and wanting and this and that. So if you kind of see her like swell up, then you can throw that male in there. So in order to get around that and like not guessing, because like with the ball python industry is you want to take a lot of that guesswork out as far as like, all right, is she ready? Do I have these certain genes? Like I said, all these different things are things we want to like eliminate time and money. So what people do is like a breeder that is serious about what they're trying to do oftentimes will get an ultrasound machine where you can like ultrasound her belly, and then you can see if those follicles are building. Once you get to a certain follicle size, like, and they measure them by like millimeters. So if I'm not an expert on that yet. I'm not even at that point where I need to buy one. But you get to a certain follicle development, and that's when all right, now she can produce eggs. So let me throw her in there, and then she'll lock with that male, and hopefully if it's successful, she'll be able to have some eggs a couple months down the line. So yeah, it's really interesting. So kind of moving on to the next topic, because I want to be able to show you some cool snakes and things like that. I've got a lot of pictures that I can kind of throw up here. The audience loves this here.
I want you to show me one or two from behind you as well.
Yeah. That was part of one of the things I want to do too. So this girl is one of my favorites. Her name is Diamond. And so this girl does not have any recessive genes, as we would call it. She has what are called incomplete dominant genes. So she is a super pastel pinstripe spider. And so this is a combination of, you could say, 4 genes. I don't know. I guess if you want to say super pastel, is 2 genes, because like each parent had to have pastel in order to make a super version, is what we would say. So if you have incomplete dominant genes, you don't need both parents to carry it. Like the male can have, so let's say the male is a pastel, which this girl has has 2 copies of pastel, but she has 2 copies of pastel because both parents had pastel. But if only one parent had pastel, that parent can still pass down that pastel. So she got pastel from both parents, and then from either or parent, she got pinstripe and spider, which I'll show you a spider in a second to kind of like segue that.
Okay.
But yeah, so she got pinstripe and spider, which kind of adds all of this like sort of hieroglyphic, these lines to her body. So really, really neat. She's just beautiful, super bright yellow, and that's a lot. That's mostly because of that super pastel in her.
Let me ask you a couple of questions about her specifically.
All right, yeah.
What? So, if she were to unroll or straighten out, probably about 3 foot. How long is she?
Yeah,
And
probably
do
about.
they do that,
Probably
or are
about.
they always? Is that why they're called balls? Because they're always balled up?
Yeah. So that's what they do. It's how they feel comfortable, but also if they like get scared or spooked, then they'll just ball up, and I assume it's just like a defensive
And they're a
sort of
constrictor,
mechanism.
right? So
Yeah.
do
So
they
they'll
constrict their
bite
food?
their prey, constrict them, and then like
Oh,
essentially choke them out until it's interesting because whenever they actually strike their prey and like they wrap it up, um, that mouse or that rat, whatever you're feeding, will struggle, and then there's like a point within seconds of like that animal like passing on from like having like the tiniest little bit of heartbeat to like passing on, and that snake will just know. And I because like it's still got all that body heat, which snakes, they have heat pits which can sort of like see that spectrum of heat and things like that. So at some point, I think it's maybe they can just feel the heartbeat of the rat or whatever it is. However, they know within seconds, they'll start eating their prey like after they kill it. It just might be the way that they've like evolved in the wild, or I don't really know. It's interesting.
So if you could guess, how old is she, and how old will she live, or how long will she live?
So she is probably a year and a half to 2 years old. So she's still really young. Yeah, I could show you another girl that's a lot older, and I don't know the specific age on her. But as far as I know, they can live like, I don't know, 25, 30 plus years. I actually think I could be wrong. Don't quote me on this. Anybody in the chat can fact check me, but I think they can live 30 plus, maybe even 40 years. So they can live quite a long life. But I kind of want to show you one other girl. So she's a lot smaller, but she carries the spider. So with that last one that I showed you, she's got pinstripe in there too, but this is a spider orange dream. Beautiful. Now she's like really orange because she's got orange dream in there, but with the patterns, like all that black on the dorsal and on the sides, that's the spider. And then it's really cool because she's got this really cool head stamp on there, which is like another sort of thing that a lot of snake breeders like, is like having a really nice head and things like that. So she's a spider, and with spiders, unfortunately, it's one of spiders can have neurological issues, which means like they'll start to like wobble their head rather than just keep it straight and focused. Like not all of them have a super severe wobble, but it's just kind of came with that sort of trait. I think, could be wrong. Like I said, feel free to fact check me, but I think Nerd, which is New England Reptile Distributors, just a company. He's an old school guy, Kevin McCurley, who's been doing this for a long time. Was the first one to have these pop up in his collection, and yeah, unfortunately, just they can have some neurological issues. And
does this one have that?
I have not noticed anything yet. I have her, and then yeah, that last one I showed you has spider. I would say Diamond, that really, really yellow one. She every now and then she'll kind of get into a little trance where she'll like, you can tell like something else is going on in her head. It's not bad, she's a really good snake and things like that. But the only issue, well, besides like slight neurological issues, some of them have really bad corkscrewing where like they don't know they're up from their down.
Wow.
And that's really sad to see. So I would say if anyone is breeding a spider into their collection. I wouldn't breed a spider that has very noticeable neurological issues, because if that happens, just have it as a pet. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Well,
But the yeah,
I can imagine in the wild they wouldn't survive very long anyway.
yeah, maybe not,
I mean,
but they are really good eaters, which is really interesting. Like they just eat and eat and eat and eat, and maybe it does have something to do with like their brain chemistry, as far as like maybe they just don't know when to stop. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but yeah, they're really good eaters. They grow big fast, and then there's this thing called spider complex, which is other. I don't know why they call it the spider complex, but it's so you have like spiders and champagnes that are in there. I think spot nose is part of that complex too. Um, but unfortunately, the issue with spiders is you can't breed a male and a female spider together. Otherwise, you get dead babies, which is like one of the only
oh,
genes. Yeah, which is like one of the if you breed spider spider or champagne to champagne, then you're not going to have viable eggs, unfortunately, or you get snakes that are dead in the egg. So no one can create a super spider, as we would call it. So I believe spider is actually a dominant gene, but there's not a lot of dominant genes that we know about. Dominant genes basically means that you only need one parent to pass that gene on to make the visual or whatever. But as far as we know, there's no super. Now, in order to explain that, I'm actually going to pull up in order to explain like the dominant and the incomplete dominant genes. I'm going to pull up a couple pictures because I think it's really interesting. So this right here is a yellow belly, and now it doesn't look too different from a normal. It doesn't look too different from a normal. People call it yellow belly because it's got, I don't know, I guess like a sort of yellow belly, but what's interesting is like all this patterning and all this
mhm.
checkering on the belly is how you can kind of tell it apart. And what's interesting about the yellow belly is, like I said, you can make yellow belly is an incomplete dominant gene. With incomplete dominant genes, there's a super form. So you could have like a super yellow belly, which is, it's got a nickname called an ivory, which is pretty much an all white snake. Um, and yeah, so let me pull up an ivory. It's really interesting. So
Wow.
this is an ivory. So this is the super form of that yellow belly. Um, and yeah, I'm showing you that because this is just how the genetics work. This is what makes it fascinating. It's kind of what people sort of live for when it comes to like ball pythons, is like you can make these super form versions of stuff, and it's just really, really interesting. Um, and let's see. Yeah, so that's kind of like something like that. So let me pull out one girl. She's a normal, but this will kind of show you about what the size of an adult ball python will get. And she'll probably get a little bit bigger, to be honest. And then, so this right here is just a normal. She's all curled up. Like I said, that's what they do. They ball up. But she's a normal.
Kind of looks like my dogs,
What? Oh yeah.
all curled up.
Oh yeah. And yeah, she's, hopefully I don't make her mad and stuff, but
So
yeah, here's a
how
normal.
large of an animal would she eat if she's full grown?
Um, so
She couldn't get she
she'll
could get a
probably get
rabbit.
bigger.
She could never get a rabbit long enough,
Um,
could she? Or,
Not preferred.
yeah.
I mean, also too, what's interesting about ball pythons. Actually, I want to pull out one more girl, but she will probably not ever eat a rabbit. At least not a full size rabbit. She can eat a large rat or a jumbo rat.
Wow.
Um, so think, yeah, and then this girl is either about the same size or a little bit bigger, but this is um, a pastel lesser. So no recessive genes in her. So she somehow, picked up two genes, from either parents. It could be she picked up pastel and lesser from one parent, or she picked up pastel from one and lesser from another. But she's really pretty. She's actually the one that had my first clutch. Um, and yeah,
So
so hopefully she'll have some more babies this year. But I kind of got to figure out that incubator type stuff.
So as you're pulling these out, I notice how passive they are, generally speaking, and I know they're a
Yes.
cold-blooded animal, but
Yes.
will they bite a human, or have you ever been bitten
Uh,
by it? Because obviously they bite to catch their prey.
Animal, yeah. I mean, I think in the wild, if something has teeth and it feels the need to use them, it's going to use them. I think, um, but I have been bit or struck at here and there, especially like working at the reptile shop. Sometimes you get ones that just have different temperaments. For the most part, ball pythons are probably the most chill sort of snake that you could get. Um, So, that's really nice. And I think that's what makes them attractive to people that are getting into reptiles. Cause I think a ball python is like the gateway snake, I guess, as you would say, because ball pythons, you kind of like learn their temperament, learn how to care for them, and then it kind of can get you into other things as far as like whether it's bigger snakes or just having a ball pythons and understanding snake care and things like that. Like I said, all snakes are different, require a little bit different temperatures, humidity, this and that. The requirements are a little bit different, but ball pythons are really easy to care for. They eat, baby ball pythons can eat, twice a week. I mean, you're kind of just trying to grow them up at that point. But once they get into adulthood or juvenile stage, you want to feed them at like once a week. Some people do, every 7 days. Some people do every 10 days. There's some people that will feed their males only every other week because they're not trying to get that male to grow to the super, super large size. Whereas a female, you want her to build that body mass so she can have healthy eggs. I'm sure it's just like a female, like, she wants those fat reserves, if she's having a baby or whatever, she wants to make sure her diet's good and this and that. So people will feed females typically a little bit more to kind of get her to grow a little bit faster to be able to, just make sure that when she has eggs that she's healthy, because oftentimes what can happen is she'll get either egg bound, which means she'll build eggs, and she won't be able to get them out, or she'll start absorbing them, which means she's building eggs, but then her body reabsorbs them because she doesn't have like the proper nutrition, or she's stressed out, or whatever the reason could be for that is that happens. Or she can lay what are called slug eggs, which is basically a non-viable egg. It's a lot smaller. It's like a lot yellower, harder. And so a lot of people will put a lot of time and money into a project, and then like the female will quote slug out, which means like she has like a bunch of eggs that are just no good. And
So would there be an instance where they're viable eggs and slug eggs, or are they all either or?
no, you can have both. So
Okay.
you could let's say, so an average for a female laying eggs, especially if she's only a couple years old, because I think the older that she gets, the bigger she gets, she has the potential to lay more eggs, from, as much as like 10, maybe 12, if you're really, really lucky, if she's an established breeder. But I would say the average is around 6. If it's her first time breeding, she might only have, 3 or 4, it give or take. But for a lot of breeders, in order to determine like, how am I financially going to do, they like average it at like 6. If you want to like make it easy, you could be like, all right, all of my females are going to lay like 5 eggs, some are going to lay 7, but like an average of 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So what can happen is you can get like 3 good eggs, and you can get like 3 slug eggs. I mean, like that could definitely happen. And my understanding is just that maybe, I don't know, maybe she just didn't have that proper nutrition to properly build up every single egg. I don't know.
Well, and it's just part of nature, I guess. But so would you go in and pull those out, or would you just let them whatever?
Yeah, so she'll lay her eggs, and if you get a slug egg and it's a slug egg, I mean, there's nothing you can really do. Pull it out, chuck it. It is what it is.
Protective of her eggs, like you would expect, or
they can be, yeah, for sure. I mean, so what happens? She'll lay her eggs, then she'll coil around them to like put that body heat on them.
Yeah.
And she'll just lay them all in a pile. And yeah, she'll coil around them. And so a breeder, when she knows that she's laid eggs, will go in there, pull her out. I guess, pull out the eggs, but take her out, grab the eggs, put her back in, and then I'm pretty sure they try to get her back on the food right away. So yeah, they'll kind of do that, and then they'll throw them in the incubator. Now there have been some people. It's very seldom and rare, I would say, but some people will do like natural maternity or whatever the correct terminology is, where they'll like just leave her in there and kind of let her incubate them herself, like she would in the wild. But if you're a breeder, like that risk, I think, is a little bit too high for a lot of people. You know what I mean? Unless it's like a low end clutch where you're like, all right, I'm just going to see if she can do it. You know, I'm not going to make, a lot of money off of it, but let's just kind of do it as an experiment. But, a lot of people will start pulling those eggs, put them in incubation boxes, like set them up in a little like tote and then put it in an incubator. And yeah, that's kind of that process. So,
wow.
So actually, now that we're talking about, breeding and incubation and all that stuff, there's, I'm going to show you a video in a second, and then I want to kind of like go through and pull up a bunch of different varieties of ball pythons that you can make or find in people's collections. But what's interesting is that when people get into the whole egg thing and they start incubating eggs, there's a point in time around between, I think, 52 and 58, but I would say 55, 56 days after she lays her eggs and her eggs are in the incubator, where people actually cut the eggs. And in the ball python community and like the industry, most people will actually cut the eggs rather than let them, quote, pip. Now, if a snake pips, what that really means is that it's naturally coming out of the egg like it would hatch in the wild. So that can be good. That can be a really good thing. I think that happens naturally to a lot of people, where like it's in the incubator and then one day they're just coming out the egg. But what's interesting is snakes, when they're born, they have this thing called a snake tooth, which is like, let's just say my nose is like the snake tooth. So I'm coming out the egg, and that tooth actually cuts open the egg where they can stick their head out. And I'm not sure if that tooth breaks off, while they're doing that, but sometimes just because of so much breeding and like having, domesticated ball pythons, that sometimes that snake could potentially be born without it. So if it's in the egg and it's trying to get out but it can't, then it'll just drown in its own fluid and stuff like that. So that has happened to a lot of people that either, let's say they're on vacation and they come back a couple days later, or sometimes it just naturally happens where that snake will drown in the egg. So in order to prevent a snake dying in the egg, people will cut at a specific number of days, because if you go past that, then it can either potentially die, or it could, if it can't get out, it could potentially use up all the I don't know if it's like amniotic fluid or all that yolk. It's supposed to absorb that yolk. It could potentially absorb all of it, not be able to get out, and just like suffocate or, like I said, drown. So I kind of want to show you something that people do. I think it's really interesting, and I kind of want to like get your take on it. So really quick, I'm gonna pull up like a quick it's like 47-second video. The video I'm gonna show for anybody watching too is a video from Billy at Mutation Creation. He's a breeder out of Canada. If you guys are getting into the ball python industry or need to find like really good educational videos for how to do this, I definitely recommend his page and his channel. So let me pull this up here.
I'll take this one here. Little bit of a dot. No real Coco Mojo on these. No windows so far. I mean, these are really clean eggs. This one here is like, just like, I don't even know how he has room. I'm trying to pinch and I can't because he's just flexing. So I'm surprised these didn't pip already. This is crazy. What? Look at this.
Another black pastel. That one's crazy. Like, look at
like,
the
look
circles.
at the the way. I mean, this is definitely. Can't wait to see the heads on these. Yeah. The dots on the dorsal stripe or the
The het markers we're seeing are...
Het markers we're seeing already is definitely proving out right now from what we're used to, or what we've been sort of, looking out for and trying to ID.
I'll go with this one. There's some pink on the bottom.
So that is what breeders do in order to, essentially make sure that that egg is, that snake is going to live. People cut at a certain day. And I think a lot of people get excited because it's like, every egg could be different, especially if you've got a lot of different genetics on both sides of that bloodline. Like if you got a male with 4 genes and a female with 4 genes, maybe you're going to get a snake that's got all 8 genes. You know what I mean? Depending on what those genes are, but
it was like they were unwrapping a Christmas present or something.
Exactly.
Like, oh wow, look what this one has and this one has and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's really interesting. And I think that's what, yeah, for ball python people and things like that, like they really gravitate towards videos like that. Like those guys, every time they have a clutch or doing an egg cutting, and yeah, it's just like what's going to be in this next egg. And so the guy in that video, his name is Billy, and then his assistant is Austin. So Austin's recording, Billy's got the, doing the egg cutting, and they'll make like little bets. So they'll play a game. They're like, all right, is this going to have like 3 genes? Is it going to be a 4 gene animal? And so they'll pick an egg, and so like Austin will pick an egg, right? And if he's got like 4 genes in there, he'll probably get like 4 points or something. But then if Billy picks an egg and he's only got two points, then he's only getting 2 points. And then by the end of like, let's say you got 6 eggs, if they each get 3 eggs, someone might have like 15 points where they have like snakes that have all these genes in them. The other person might have like literally random, but like randomly picked an egg that doesn't have many. So they make it a game too. Not everybody like necessarily like makes it a game, but it's kind of fun for people to watch. And every time you watch a video, it is like, yeah, Christmas. Are we going to hit the odds? Which is kind of what they say.
All right. So from the time that he cut that egg open, how long does it take for the snake to go, hey, this is another world, and climb out?
So from what I understand, like I said, I don't have a lot of experience doing this, but I know that it takes a couple of days, maybe up to like a week, because in order for them to come out, they have to absorb all their yolk. If they come out and they don't absorb all their yolk, they're going to probably be unhealthy, as far as like not getting that nutrients, because that yolk that is in there has nutrients still built up in it. So their umbilical cord is like still absorbing all that.
Wow.
But in order to ensure that they survive, they cut the egg, kind of give them a little bit of fresh air. And then, once they're like, oh, I'm ready to go search for food myself. But until then, they kind of have that food and that nutrients there. So I think it could take up to like a week. Sometimes, probably, 3 days to a week. But like I said, fact check me, guys. I've only had 1 clutch. So
as a novice, I will tell you I was surprised about a couple of things there. One is the size of the eggs. For some reason, I was just thinking they were going to be, really, really small. And then that, I guess, goes along with, I was surprised at the size of the snake inside there. I just had the assumption they would be, tiny little earthworm size or something like that.
Oh, okay,
whenever they actually come out, and by no stretch are they that at all.
Yeah.
And I guess is that, how long from the time that they hatch will they actually feed?
It's another good question. You're asking like all the right questions.
Well, okay. Can I say?
Yeah.
I hope, and I hope people get to listen through this whole thing here. And what I would say, especially if you as a community of breeders and of Python people want to grow your community, you're going to do it through people like me who have no idea what you're doing. And so hopefully you'll obviously, as professionals, you guys will approach things in a certain way, but also to draw in people like me, just keep that in mind, that the questions I ask for you guys may be super basic and really like, why is he asking such a dumb question? But those are things that we don't know, and this education is definitely enlightening. So just keep that, if you're as you try to grow the community, make sure that people like me can understand. I didn't know what did you call it, a clutch?
Clutch. Yep, that's the group of eggs that. Yeah, or I mean, a group of eggs or a group of snakes coming from the same mother at the same time.
Anyway, so yeah, you're teaching me technology or terminology that I never knew existed.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's important. I think that's why I do these podcasts.
Feeding after.
Oh yeah.
After a hit.
So I'm thinking probably like around a week after is when they'll start trying to find food. There are instances where a snake will not eat because it's just like new to the world. It doesn't know how to go and search for food, and then maybe just being domesticated that they're just so used to being like hand fed. I guess could be an issue. So a snake is supposed to eat within like a week or two after it hatches and starts, crawling around.
All right, so I have a kind of follow-up question to that is, are snakes cannibalistic in the sense of I wouldn't expect the mother would ever consume one of its own, but would if multiple snakes were in an enclosure, would another python come in and eat the babes?
Not a ball python. I've never heard of that ever happening. But there are some snakes that are, I don't know if you want to say cannibalistic, but like cobras will eat other snakes. So if you're looking at like cobras, they'll eat other snakes and things like that. And so a lot of times, cobra breeders or keepers will feed snakes to them. Like let's say even they got cobras in their collection, which like is only, I mean, there's other states that allow it, but like Texas, there's venomous breeders there. But if they have like ball pythons in their collection and they do get like some snakes that don't really make it past that hatching state, then they might feed that to the snake or whatever. But as far as ball pythons and pythons doing that, that's not really the thing.
Okay.
For sure. So I just want to actually, we'll get into some pictures really quick because I want you to see those because we are kind of running down on time a little bit. But how do you feel about me keeping snakes and trying to pursue this as not only a hobby but like a business? Because as you know, and as we've talked about, I grew up really wanting to do music. I wanted to go into school for music production, and I think there was a part of me that always wanted to be like a hip hop artist or a rapper. I wouldn't even mind have been in a band. I played guitar for youth groups and church and things like that myself. And I really enjoyed it. I would never consider myself like the best guitar player or anything like that, but I think when I got my first ball python, I wasn't expecting to ever do this at all. I wasn't even researching it. I was working at the grow that I was working for a couple of years, and there would be like mice that would run around all the time, and we'd catch the mice or kill them or this or that. And it's like, man, like if I just had a snake, like I could just feed these mice to a snake and it'd be cool. And I've always wanted a ball python. So I went to the reptile shop thinking like, hey, I'm gonna just get a ball python. I'm gonna have like unlimited food for it. So I get there and I'm like, yeah, I've got like $200. What can I get? I paid more for, of course, for an enclosure. So I made sure I had everything I needed, and the heat mat and everything. But he's like, don't feed it wild caught animals because like they could have parasites and this and that, which is true. I mean, animals in nature can have parasites and viruses and diseases. And if you're feeding that to your snake, it's just like us. We wouldn't want to eat anything that's diseased. So why would you do that to your snake or to your dog or whatever, So, like he kind of educated me and started telling me about like all these morphs, which is like, morph is like a general term that we use for like the topics I was telling you about, like recessives and complete dominant traits. But it's just a general word for that entire spectrum of like, this is a visual, or it's a morph is something that can affect the pattern or the color of a snake. So, or even other reptiles too. You could say there's bearded dragon morphs. There's like milk snake morphs. It's really interesting because not only in ball pythons are there these color and pattern mutations that are like naturally occurring, and then people see that, oh, like this snake is like way more orange or yellow than a normal snake. I wonder if it's carrying something different. And then people will find these snakes in the wild, like in Africa. They'll get imported to the U.S. and then people will buy them. And whenever we get like an import or a mutation in our clutches that is just kind of abnormal, People will call them dinkers. It's like a really funny word, but people will take a dinker, whether it's like a wild caught or just this random weird looking snake that popped up in someone's collection, like from a mother or something. They'll breed that back to like the mother or the father or whatever of that clutch. And a lot of times they'll discover that they made a new gene. You know what I mean? So that's how most of the morphs popped up in like the ball python community, and same with like bigger dragons and other reptiles. You know, and a big example would be like albino. Albino pops up in like almost everything. So pretty much any animal that you can think of, there's an albino version. Some of them are more domesticated than others, meaning that like they're more accessible. Like you can go and buy albino turtles, like albino red-eared sliders and stuff like that pretty easily. You can buy like albino monitors. Yeah, all sorts of different animals, you know. And I think with ball pythons, it's such a big industry that price point has gone way down to where it's like affordable for anybody who wants to get into it.
So does an albino python also have white eyes, or are they
an albino
just the
python?
body?
So they typically have red or pink eyes. So let me show you this. This is actually one of the ones I just picked up. Now this is a line of albino, meaning it's not just an albino by itself. I mean, it is an albino, meaning it lacks that melanin or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a lavender albino.
Okay.
So it might be hard to catch on camera, but it's got more like deeper like pinks and purples and stuff like that, compared to just like a normal albino, which would be a little bit not as bright and maybe a little bit more washed out. You know, more yellow than anything.
I would expect an albino just to be solid white.
So what's really interesting is there are solid white snakes, and what we call those are bells. Which there's blue-eyed leucistic snakes, and then there's black-eyed leucistic snakes. They're all white snakes. It just depends on what sorts of pairings that you put into those to make that. But in those instances, you're taking an incomplete dominant trait to an incomplete dominant trait. They said both parents, breeding them together, and then sometimes, depending on those genes, you might get a white snake. So I bred. So with my first clutch, I actually did make an all-white snake. Reptile shop got it. They helped me out with the incubator. It was probably the most expensive snake that I made, but the thing with getting a blue-eyed leucistic snake and an all-white snake is like it could carry a bunch more genes other than the ones that you know that made it white, but you might not know until you actually breed it. So I wasn't really interested in trying to put in that time to do it, even though she was beautiful. I really wish that I had been able to keep her. But yeah, so let me get into some of these snakes. I might do like a sort of like like a PowerPoint type presentation where I'm just going through slides. But I just want to see what you think about each of them. So first up, we got a banana. Now I do have this in my collection. This is obviously not mine, but this is one of the snakes that I don't know, maybe it was like 15, 20 years ago. I'm not exactly sure when this morph was found. But this banana, I think at the time was going for like $10,000, maybe $20,000. And that price point has dropped because everybody saw it was so different from anything else that they had ever seen that like eventually everyone wanted it in everything in their collection. Like they banana everything. And why they call it banana is you can kind of see there's little black spots on there. As a banana ages, it starts getting all these freckles all over its body like an aging banana. And so I did make some bananas. So kind of let me show you one of them. He's really, really, this is my holdback. Instead of getting the all-white snake, I made this guy. So this guy is a banana lesser pastel fire. So that's 4 incomplete dominant traits. When he came out, it's really hard to capture. It's starting to get darker out. but he was like all pink and like pink and white when he was born. He's got like a lot of like purples and stuff like that. Just with his genetics, he's not going to get spots. Just like genetics are interesting with the ball pythons because like you can add two genes together and they're going to make something completely different.
So that brings up another question: is when they hatch, what you see is what they'll be forever.
So as
you know, like
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
So typically a snake is going to age and it's going to get a little bit washed out. So its patterns are going to get a lot more dull. A lot of people will use the term browning out, meaning like it'll look super bright, super fantastic as a baby. And then over 5 years, or even after like every shed, it might just get duller and duller. So kind of like what people are trying to do is get genetics that kind of retain that vividness in their pattern and their color. So that does happen. If you get an older snake, it's not going to look as good as it was when it was a baby, pretty much no matter what you get. So yeah, after 5 years, you're like, oh, this is, you know, not necessarily like the same snake that it was growing up, but like sometimes you get a baby that hatches and it's just like super bright and super vivid. And yeah, so I kind of want to show you this one. So these are my friends at Leviathan Snakes. I'm actually going to have them on my show, but they're working with this mutation called Sunset. Now this, it's really kind of hard to like pull it up. Maybe I should have kind of cropped it a little bit better, but this is called a Sunset. And a lot of people get people either like it or they hate it because like it looks great as a baby. It's like super red, super orange, kind of like the patterns of like a sunset or whatever. But as it gets older, people complain that it browns out, doesn't look as good. And so in order to combat that, people are adding like ultramel to it, which in ultramel, I don't even know if I don't think I have ultramel on these slides, but ultramel is like a super orange snake. And you add that to kind of like combat that, or a lot of people add like, some people add like some fire, which like I said, I don't have like a picture of that, but it's just a gene that it's a color enhancing gene.
Now, see, you're doing what you did as a child. You're not listening. I already told you about the ultramale.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all ultramales.
There you go.
So, okay. So I did bring up this clown.
Wow.
Now, so we did talk about that before, but what's really interesting and what you can do with it is you can make a Batman. Now, a Batman is a clown spot-nosed leopard. And so, yeah, this is a Batman. This is pretty much on the forefront of what people are trying to work with. Like for the past 5 years, maybe even longer, probably like 5 years. I'm not sure how old this sort of combo is, but people make this Batman, and then people make combos, and then they call it kind of like whatever they want. Like if you're making a certain combo and you like a world's first, you know what I mean, first ever produced. A lot of times people can name it what they want.
Is that kind of the holy grail of breeders? Is to create something that no one else has ever seen?
Yeah, for sure. And we won't even get into the grail stuff because there's even like a grail ball python, which is like a combo of stuff. I know some of my friends have joked about making the holy grail. And then this guy from Canova literally just made a combo of clown, desert ghost, and pied. And he called it the trifecta because it's a triple visual recessive. I don't have a picture of that either. But kind of along those lines, on a different spectrum with a color mutation, you're making, you can make, this one's a banana Mojave clown. Just
I really
that banana.
Like that one. I like the along its back there. And
for sure.
Yeah, that's really amazing.
Yeah, so that's really awesome because that banana brings out a lot of those oranges and yellows. Now, this is an example of a snake that popped up in somebody's collection. I think it was Dave Green Reptiles. He just had like whatever snakes he was working with, and then it popped up as a genetic mutation, and he proved that that there was an ability for those genes to get passed down. So this is a monsoon. Now, this is a $10,000 snake at the moment. And whenever he produced it, yeah, he didn't know if it was going to transfer its genetics down, but it did. It proved out. And so here's like another combo. Oh, actually, excuse me. This is not the Monsoon, but this is a Pastel Leopard Spectre Sparks Yellow Belly. Pastel Leopard Spectre Spark Yellow Belly, which is not a. Yeah, I can't. Now, this is not a Monsoon at all. It does not have that Monsoon gene in it, but it kind of just shows you that with enough genetics, you can make something that's just totally unique, which I think is fascinating because like some people might call this like the poor man's Monsoon or whatever. But this takes more work to create and hit those combos than even this Monsoon. Like this Monsoon is just a single gene. It's a recessive, so you can't see it. Like if this one has babies with a male, because this one says it's a female. So if this female has eggs just from like a normal ball python, you're not going to know that the Monsoon's in there. But still, even like the het version is still a couple $1,000s, where you're still paying probably $2,000 or $3,000 just because you know that that gene's there, and that if you have two of them, you can make a $10,000 snake. And that's why I think it's so fascinating. Is like you can, yeah, buy like two $2,000 animals, and you might make a $5,000-$10,000 animal. So
is there ever a time when say breeder A see and they have this very special snake, and then they have a friend or someone they know who's a breeder B and say, hey, let's take my male and your female and put them together, and then we I mean,
yes,
you guys work together with that, or is it you just have to buy until you get what you want?
It depends. There are definitely breeders that do that. I would say, for at least hearing stories of people that do that, you want to know the other breeder B. You want to know breeder B very well, because it's a joint thing. Like either you might only get one snake that both you guys want, and like who's getting it? Are you keeping it? Are you selling it? Another thing too is like who's going to house it? Is it going to be this person or this person? Are they going to run off with your snakes, or are they going to like hoard the collection themselves, never speak to you again? But there are definitely breeders that do that as long as you can trust them. Yeah. And we don't have a lot of time left. We got maybe like 10 or 15 minutes before I got to head to work. But I kind of want to show you a couple more, and then we'll kind of wrap this up.
Sure.
So, yeah, I already pulled that one up. So this is a leopard puma, and it's got, het puzzle in there. But this is a really cool combination. Now, a puma is a yellow belly spark, and then adding that leopard creates this really cool pattern. Almost looks like a giraffe or something, to be honest. And like I said, I'm just showing you like a variety of what you can create with certain genes. This is a pastel leopard gravel spark, ball python. Really amazing. Like I would love to make that, but with some of these that have like 4 or 5 genes in them, like it can be kind of hard to hit those odds
and it
things like
years,
that.
It takes years to develop, I'm assuming. Multiple breeds or whatever.
Yeah, it can. Yeah, you could shoot for something and not hit it in your first year or your second year. If you're really trying to go for something specific.
That's cool.
So this is a highway, which is really, really awesome. A freeway, which is really awesome. And the difference between the freeway and the highway. So a highway, for anybody watching, is a yellow belly gravel. So let me pull this back up here. Yellow belly gravel. Then you, instead of having that gravel with the yellow belly, you add asphalt to your yellow belly, and you get a freeway. Two little bit different snakes, but then if you build on top of this and add other genes, those two are going to interact a little bit differently. Now, this is the direction that I want to go, is with the lavender stuff. Now, this is this, and then you add the lavender to it. So completely different, same pattern pretty much, but you take out all that color and it brings in that oranges and those yellow, and lavender is really what I'm trying to get into. So I love it. I mean, it's I just love the orange and the yellows and the whites, because the whites are pronounced and then the oranges and the yellows come through. And to me, that's just awesome. And then this is kind of along the same lines. of Enchi asphalt, and then they put or yellow belly because asphalt and yellow belly by themselves are really hard to differentiate. And I don't know this one.
Wow.
So this hold on really quick. So this next set of photos are, I don't know what the genes are. Maybe they might have a caption, but I'm just showing you some really cool stuff that I found on Instagram. So this, yeah, I'm just gonna go through these like slides, but that's just amazing. I can't imagine, how much that snake is worth.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is a
Wow.
yeah, it almost looks like a Dalmatian, but this is a pied. Now this isn't like the best example of pied that I can really try to show you, because this one is almost all white, but pieds come in all sorts of. A pied means that it's got patches of white throughout its body, and this is a high white pied, but it also has all these like spots. So this one on the caption says, "This snake is a Suma pied ball python. This snake is expressing 2 copies of the codominant gene called mahogany. The snake is also visually expressing the recessive gene called piebald. The name Suma is given to the superform of the mahogany mutation. The mahogany is an excellent darkening mutation and tends to make combos look richer in contrast. It is so cool that the piebald gene caused the snake to have random dots all over."
That's crazy.
Really interesting. Yeah. Here is another one.
You guys are talking like scientists or doctors or something.
Pretty much. I mean, we're essentially geneticists, which is, it's crazy to think that. But oftentimes, like, I'm not going to say that we do, but like, you get some reptile breeders and ball python breeders that know more than their exotic vet that they can take their snake to. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. There's another one, Adder GHI Red Stripe Banana. This is an Orange Dream Black Pastel Calico Clown. Now this is a new combo. This girl is a Black Pastel Red Stripe Yellow Belly Spot Nose Pinstripe Clown, which I can't even imagine how much the snake is. I can imagine it's not going for less than 5,000. I bet you it's probably close to 10,000. But at the same time, this might be what we call a holdback, where like they're not selling it. They made it and they're gonna breed it, and it's gonna be like a staple in their collection. And I bring up Justin Kobilka stuff because he's such an influence in our industry. He makes videos, all the time, and he'll show stuff like this that literally nobody's ever seen. Like, this is why people get into it, because they want to make something you've never seen. And then, like with Justin Kobilka being one of the biggest breeders and one of the most influential breeders with like snakes that are $10,000, or like his snakes, if you want to get into it, like you're spending at least 1,000, but you're probably spending 2,000, 5,000, or if you like really want to make an investment, he's got snakes for $10,000 for sale or more, which is crazy.
Will people spend that money just for a pet? Just for
no,
like a
you'd be pretty dumb to try to do that.
Okay.
So this is a sugar lavender albino, really cool looking. I'm not. I think that's a banana cinnamon or something. Maybe black pastel in there. Another really cool one. They're saying this is a hidden gene Woma super entry super stripe, aka Orion complex. See, I don't know. There's some things I don't know as much about, but just really interesting.
Wow.
Cypress Fire Yellow Belly Spot Nose Clown. This is a pied. So see, there's like white on there, and then it's like goes into the pattern and out of the pattern, like in and out. Coral Glow Mahogany Pied. Coral Glow Yellow Belly, Coral Glow, Powerball Clown. Powerball is just a combination of specific genes. And once again, Canova. Canova makes all the best stuff. There's a close-up of it. Really awesome. But anyways, so what do you think?
It's pretty amazing. I mean, it's from a layman's perspective, again, you just think a python's a python, and so, but to see the creativity that you guys are doing to make these, almost brand new animals, that are they're just phenomenal. And I can see why people would want to have, something that's very unique like that. Again, from a layman's perspective, it would, I guess one of my questions would be, and I don't know how to say this tactfully, but if you're breeding a snake and it's not to what you want, is it a throwaway? I mean, what?
No, you sell it. You sell it for like a lower value, or sell it as a pet, or somebody that's just getting into breeding. Because I mean, you're not always going to hit what you want. You might have like one snake in there, two snakes that you want. I would say for an experienced breeder, they might only hold one back per clutch, so they're selling 5 out of 6 or something. Because they might only hit one that kind of hits all those check marks.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
and there's that market out there for snakes as far as
yeah. And I would say it's always been there, but I think when COVID hit, people got like stimulus money, didn't have a lot to do, they had to kind of stay home. People were watching YouTube videos. I would say there's been a huge market during the COVID sort of thing that kind of spiked people's interest in it. Now people want to say because of the recession that like there's not as much of a market for it, but there is. It's just people, instead of buying like even $500 or $1,000 animals, or even 300, whatever, like we'll call that low end. People are actually more invested in the long term. So that means you're gonna spend more money on a snake now. So you're not buying as many, but you're buying more pricey sort of animals and things like that. So it's an investment strategy. Exactly. It's designer.
Yeah.
So I do have to wrap this up, but I want to ask you one last question. Actually two. What have you learned, and is there anything positive that you want to leave for anybody watching this? Or it doesn't even have to be for ball python breeders or anything like that, but I want you to leave something positive behind. So first question, what have you learned? Is there anything that sticks out?
I can't even begin to tell you what I've learned. I mean, there's so much that you guys do that that is, again, for a layman like me, a novice, is just, way over here. But it takes, I guess, what I related to is, dogs, they have the snickerdoodle and the labradoodle and the blah blah blah, how they're interbreeding to try to create something new, and you guys are doing that just in a different area, but it's fascinating. It really is. And I just as a father, it's pretty exciting to see, because I know that when you go into something, or you've always kind of dove in head first and wanted to do, really just do it right. And it sounds like, the community, especially the community that you guys have, is so important to really get good at what you do. And so, that's just very encouraging. And what I would leave with, with the people who might see this is, just in your quest for that holy grail, or whatever you got, as you guys talk and as you commune and learn from each other, just remember that there's people out here like me that just don't know what all it takes, and just to spend this time with you, I know 1,000% more than I did before. So yeah, very fascinating. And somehow, if you can get that out to guys like us, then your industry will take off.
Well, Dad, thank you so much. I hope everybody's still watching. I'm sure you are, because this has probably been the best interview that I've had so far. Thank you so much. You're very articulate, very curious when you ask your questions, and I think you've asked all the right questions. But let's kind of wrap this up. I'm going to play the outro video. If you guys are still watching, I've got F&A balls next week. I've got a whole lineup for the next 3 months, January through March. New guest every single week. Please make sure you subscribe to this channel. Comment below. Send my dad some birthday wishes. It's his birthday today when you're watching this. I want to see all the love that you guys have.
Be nice to the old man.
Definitely support this channel. Subscribe. Like this video. And
one last thing,
yes.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
Now you all know where he got his handsome good looks.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dad. You have a good night. Stick around for a second.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have you behind the stage once we're done with this. But let's do this intro outro.
Love.
And then you started doing your lives, and I think I was on your first live ever. And like, then you just started bringing on all these guests. Looking back, both of us have kind of come a long way, and that's really awesome to see. The laws are getting harsher and harsher, and once you create a law that says, hey, you can't have this, it's 100 times harder to go back and get that back into, you know, circulation. If you win first place or best in show for that category, you might win $500. You might win $1,000. Close to 1,400 followers on Instagram, 1.65K subs on YouTube, and an astonishing 63.1 thousand followers on TikTok. Tell me about that experience. I think it sparks a lot of interest for people, and I've seen that dude make $1,000 on a live. Just people donating money, like, you know, $200 here, $300. Like, it's crazy, man. That dude's killing it.